Greetings, I'm the man behind the mask, and I would like to talk to you about hockey. Yes, let's talk about hockey, a show that journeys through the history of the sport of ice hockey from its disputed origins to the game we see today. Last time, we highlighted goaltender Manon Rhéaume, the first woman to ever play in a National Hockey League game, when she suited up for the Tampa Bay Lightning to play against the St. Louis Blues during an exhibition game on September 23, 1992. Since Rhéaume, women have taken to ice hockey in unprecedented numbers. But women playing organized hockey was hardly a new concept in the early 1990s, as women have been forechecking, backchecking, and crashing the crease for over a century.
In fact, Lord Stanley of Preston's daughter, Lady Isobel Stanley, was a pioneer in the women's game and is one of the first females to be photographed using a puck and stick on the natural ice rink at Rideau Hall in Ottawa, Canada, around 1890. The first traces of organized women's hockey in Canada date back to around this time, when it was played at the university level. The University of Toronto and Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, were two of the first Canadian universities to field women's hockey teams. There are still disputes over where the first women's hockey game was played in Canada, with the Women's Hockey Association claiming that the city of Ottawa, Ontario hosted the first game in 1891, and the Canadian Hockey Association saying the first recorded women's hockey game took place in 1892 in Barrie, Ontario. Regardless, by the turn of the century, women's hockey teams were playing all across Canada. Photos suggest that the standard uniform included long wool skirts, which would give them a bit of a goaltending advantage, turtleneck sweaters, hats, and gloves. When the First World War broke out in 1914, many Canadian men began trading their hockey sticks for guns and headed to the battlegrounds of Europe, significantly diminishing the rosters of professional men's teams and thus causing the sport to suffer. In Montreal, the Wanderers even went as far as offering free tickets to wounded soldiers and their families in hopes to increase attendance to games. With the men's league suffering, women skated in to fill the gap.
In Montreal in 1914, for example, 28 young women employed at the Bell Telephone Company formed a league with 4 clubs. Although this league would only last a year, the next year in 1915 another 4-club league was formed in Montreal.
Among the league's teams was the Montreal Westerns Club, owned and operated by Len Porteous, a local entrepreneur who sought out the best players and paid them to play, therefore attracting thousands of spectators. Their rivals were the Cornwall Victorias and their star player Albertine Leponce, the miracle maid from Cornwall, who sometimes scored as many as 15 goals in one game. Because of her skill, suspicions and accusations that she was really a man dogged her the rest of her hockey career. The Montreal players even yanked off Leponce's toque at one point in a game to see how long her hair was, only to find she had braids that fell past her shoulders. Unable to stop Leponce even with their star player Agnes Vautier, a player many praised as the female Nuzi Lalonde, the frustrated Westerns owner took to the road on scouting trips until he came back with Ada Lalonde. Thinking they had discovered a prodigy, the Westerns' hopes were shattered the day before they played Cornwall, when it was revealed that Ada Lalonde was really a boy disguising himself as a girl in the hopes of being able to play against Leponce. Though the scoring records are incomplete, they indicate that Leponce scored 80% of Cornwall's goals in the 1916-1917 season, and the next year she led the Victorias to an undefeated season as well. However, when the men returned home from war and the league began to fizzle out after only 2 seasons, Albertine Leponce vanished, and even to this day, not even her family knows for certain what really happened to her. Women's hockey would peak again in the 1920s and 30s, with teams, leagues, and tournaments in almost every region of Canada and a few areas of the United States as well. Some of the best Canadian teams would even meet annually in an East-West tournament to declare a national champion when Lady Bessborough, the wife of Governor-General of Canada Lord Bessborough, donated a championship trophy for the Dominion Women's Amateur Hockey Association that was founded in the winter of 1933. In Western Canada, the big tournament was the Bamf Winter Carnival, which operated from 1917 to 1935 and paid each team up to 25% of the gate receipts to help cover their expenses. This tournament featured the best women's teams from around Western Canada, including the Calgary Regents, the Vancouver Amazons, the Fernie Swastikas, that is, back when a swastika was looked at as a symbol of good fortune, similar to the four-leaf clover, and the Edmonton Monarchs, as they competed for the Banff Winter Carnival Trophy, which in later years was known as the Alpine Cup. In Eastern Canada, there was the Ladies Ontario Hockey Association, formed on December 16, 1922. The organization was structured so that it would be run by women, but with men still serving in an advisory capacity. Several years later, on February 7, 1927, Queen's University goaltender Elizabeth Graham gave the fans a surprise when she stepped into the nets and then donned a fencing mask, becoming the first goaltender ever to wear a mask for protection. The speculation is that she had used the mask at the request of her father as a means of protecting dental work that had recently been performed. In 1931, the LOHA welcomed the Preston Rivulettes to its ranks. A former girls' softball team, the Rivulets would go undefeated from 1931 to 1935, winning 5 consecutive provincial championships, and would only lose 2 games and tie 3 in the estimated 350 games that they played between 1931 and 1940. Although their early success would promote women's hockey, by 1938 their later success would prove to be an organization challenge to the LOHA governing body. Many ladies' teams in Ontario did not want to join the LOHA because they felt they had no chance of winning. The Rivulets' success caused the number of member teams to decrease, and the decision was made for the LOHA to create an A-League and a B-League. The B-League would include first-year teams as well as teams that were not at a high skill level. However, due to the strain of the Depression, by 1941, the LOHA was dissolved and it merged with the Ontario branch of the Women's Amateur Athletic Federation.
The organized women's game declined after World War II, and throughout the 1950s and 60s was regarded as little more than a curiosity. Hockey was assumed to be the preserve of men and boys, an attitude that was confirmed in 1956 when 9-year-old Abby Hoffman decided she wanted to play hockey in her hometown, and her parents discovered there were no leagues for girls in the Toronto area. So the Hoffmans cut their daughter's hair and registered her as Ab Hoffman in the only league available, a boys' league.
Later on that season, Ab was selected for the Toronto Hockey League All-Star team. But when Ab produced the required birth certificate, league conveners were shocked to discover Ab was really Abigail. She was dismissed from the team, and the story made international news when her parents challenged the league's boys-only rule. But the league's policy was upheld by the Ontario Supreme Court, and young Abby was barred from participating. Though in later years, Hoffman would assist the Canadian Amateur Hockey Association in implementing a national women's championship. And today, representatives from each province vie for the Abby Hoffman Cup. A revival did begin for the women's game in the 1960s. Though most girls attempting to join boys' teams were still rejected, women's hockey slowly gained ice time, and as the new generation of players grew up, they demanded a chance to play at colleges and universities. In fact, it was around this time that Monroe, Michigan native Karen Cook became the first professional female hockey player in North America when she signed a contract for $40 per game with the Marquette Iron Rangers of the USHL during the 1969-70 season. An international breakthrough for the women's game would come in April of 1987, when 7 teams contested the first Women's World Ice Hockey Championship in North York, Canada, a tournament that was ultimately won by Team Canada when they defeated the province of Ontario 4-0 in the gold medal game.
Though this was the first major world tournament for the women's game, it was looked at as an unofficial one, since the International Ice Hockey Federation did not recognize it. However, during the tournament, representatives from participating nations met to establish a strategy to lobby the IIHF for the creation of an official Women's World Championship.
This prompted the IIHF to hold the first Women's European Ice Hockey Championships in West Germany during April of 1989. This new tournament featured 10 countries, and when all was said and done, Finland skated away with gold medal honors after beating Sweden 7-1. Then the next year, in March of 1990, the IIHF premiered the first official Women's World Championship tournament at the Civic Center Arena in Ottawa, Canada, that featured the countries of Switzerland, Norway, Finland, the United States, Canada, Japan, Sweden, and West Germany, all going head-to-head for the title. Once again, Canada took home the gold in the World Showdown, while the U.S. and Finland took silver and bronze respectively.
Participation grew exponentially in the decade that followed, as the Women's World Championships were held every other year, with the European tournament being held in between the World tournaments. Though since the European tournament did not include the U.S., Canada, Japan, or China, the IIHF created the Women's Pacific Rim Championship in April of 1995 for these countries to compete in while the European teams were vying for their tournament's championship.
However, when women's hockey finally made its Olympic debut at the 1998 Games in Nagano, Japan, the IIHF consolidated the European and Pacific Rim Championships and began holding the World Championships once a year, with the exception of Olympic years. Aside from the World Championship stage and the Olympics, there are also a few leagues of elite women's ice hockey in operation, including the Canadian Women's Hockey League and Western Women's Hockey League in Canada, the Riksserien in Sweden, and the Women's Premier Ice Hockey League in the United Kingdom. Additionally, since Manon Rhéaume, several more women have participated in professional men's leagues, including Haley Wickenheiser, Charlene Labonte, Kelly Dyer, Erin Witten, and Angela Ruggiero. Plus, the 2010 class of inductees to the Hockey Hall of Fame included the first two women ever to be inducted into the Hall. 8-time MVP and former Team Canada captain Angela James, who led Canada to 4 straight World Championships, and Lester Patrick Award winner and former Team USA captain Cammy Granato, who led the United States to Olympic gold in 1998 and a World Championship in 2005. With talks circulating of the Canadian Women's Hockey League turning professional and the 2011 IIHF Women's World Championships set to take place in Switzerland, only time will tell what new developments will come for this rapidly growing sport.